while my manager is amazing and a very honest and hardworking person, they do not understand business practices to the extent that I thought they would. I thought that before they had been looking at the numbers, the revenue and the profit margins, they were never part of that. They were only there to run the team and to bring in top line revenue. That is the reason for our J curve, is because I was making assumptions about the manager that were not accurate. So I took a more hands-off approach the first 3 months, and I was thinking that he knew.
It doesn't matter how good of an operator you are or how clean of a deal process you run. This is just part of being an entrepreneur, and it is impossible to understand how to run your business in a 90-day diligence period.
You can think you know as much as you want, but then you actually go get punched in the face when you jump in the ring. Welcome back to Main Street Deals. Per our usual routine, I've got my partner, Kevin Henderson, here. Kevin, good morning.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Sam, even if it's just, 14 hours after the last time.
Don't give away our secrets. We may be building a little inventory. But today we have a really special guest on a podcast where we don't often do special guests.
Is this our first special guest?
No, I think it's our second.
Oh, that's right. We had one of our other lawyers from the firm. But anyway, yeah.
Who is the special guest today? I don't think I should introduce her.
This is my wife, Tara. You may have heard reference to her before. We recently bought a business that she's in the full-time operator seat. And to continue on last week's discussion about mistakes searchers make, realities of buying a business, things like that, we decided to continue that discussion and talk about the realities of, buying and owning a business on a marriage generally, but also as a married couple partnership operating the business. There's kind of two different approaches. Some married couples where one spouse is the searcher and operator, and then others like us where we both searched. We both are involved in the business, but she's really the operator, and we wanted to unpack that.
Awesome. So my other podcast partner host would not be happy if I didn't at least lay a little bit of groundwork into like the why you guys did this. So let's back up a little bit, because I think it's really important, first of all, to say Kevin's about as sharp and knowledgeable into ETA as you could possibly be. And yet it's hard, and you guys have had an adventure so far, and it's early days. So I think that's like, one, you can think you know as much as you want, but then you actually go get punched in the face when you jump in the ring.
Absolutely.
But the second one is like, let's scoot back just a little bit. So Tara, tell me like what you see your role in your family as for, say, the last 20 years. And then roughly what phase of life you're in that allowed you today, or at least in the last couple of years, to get more involved in business dealings.
Yeah. So Kevin and I come from very traditional backgrounds. So I stayed at home the first 10 years and we had children right away. So that was my primary job for the first 10 years of our marriage. And then for the last 10, because yes, we've already been married 21 years soon this summer.
It's hard to believe because I'm only 26, Sam.
It's hard to believe because you got nice hair.
So the second 10 years of our marriage, I started, it sounds bad, but dabbling into work, figuring out, okay, now I'm going to balance part-time work with also being the primary parent. Because as any of you with 3 children know, it's a lot of work. And Kevin always worked at Big Law or other very demanding careers. And so there was, I say it a lot and I say it without judgment, there was not going to be any slack picked up if I went to work. And it's still, actually over the last 4 months, he has picked up some slack. It's been crazy. But our stage of life is now, our children are 20, 17, and 14. So while I worked part-time the last 10 years, building my resume, deciding, figuring out where my strengths lied, I also was still raising the kids. But now they can drive. I raised them so they know how to cook, they know how to clean, they know how to do their laundry. And so I was ready for something more. And about 2 years ago, I am adjacent to this ecosphere of ETA. And so when 2 years ago, I was like, you know what, Kevin, I'm ready to actually work full time. The kids are, they're phasing me out of their lives. That sounds bad, but it's just the way it is with teenagers.
Well, it's also like we're not that old because we
Yeah.
had kids so young. And so there was this moment last year, well, for several years,
Yeah.
right? But really picked up last year of that kind of existential, like, we're going to be empty nesters in a couple of years. Tara will be 45 when our youngest goes off to college. That's a lot of life left, right? And so then it was like, well, what are we going to do, particularly from Tara's perspective? What am I going to do? Do I start, looking at building a career? And so, yeah, anyway, that helpful context.
Yeah. And so Kevin said, what do you think about buying a business and you operating it? And luckily, the jobs I've had over the last 10 years, I have been in charge of people. I have run teams and coordinated things. And so I was like, yeah, I could be an operator. Let's start looking or putting out feelers, because like we will talk about, like, our search journey was not the same
Traditional.
typical search
Yeah.
journey.
So I think that background is really important because a lot of people that do ETA are doing it mid-career.
Yeah.
And you guys have some advantages in that experience phase of life, and you have some disadvantages, which is Kevin's mostly tied up.
Correct.
So I think it would be a shame to forget to mention that like 5 years ago, you have been on the journey of building S&B Law Group as a spouse, right? And
Yes.
like the three of us have spouses, and we
Which she
had
has
all
loved, by the way.
should we keep that in? So, I mean, look, like, she's watched you practice law, but then she watched you practice law starting 4 years ago as a entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Which is totally different because then you had to manage people, manage a business. Like, it's been fun and financially rewarding, but probably no less stressful than being just a lawyer.
I would say more stressful, if we're
Totally.
allowed to be honest.
Well, isn't that like a truism of business ownership? Is it might give you one form of independence? Like, it may give you some financial independence. It takes it away on the other hand.
Well, yeah, I mean, Tara hinted at that, right? Of like early in my career, it's true. Like, I was not picking up any slack at home because I was in an office downtown for 18 hours a day, right? I mean, that was my life. I still work, sadly, similar types of days often. I was up late last night, due to things, but it is different. It's a trade-off, right? Because now I do have that flexibility. At noon today, I'm going to log out and go take my son to the doctor, which I never would have done when I was in the corporate world or in big law, right? Yesterday was the last day of school. I had to knock off a little early and go to a kid's hockey game and log back on later. So I worked really late at night. I still worked a long day, but I took this big chunk off to be with my family, be with my kids. And we could talk for a minute later, which I think is important thing to talk about of physical presence isn't necessarily presence with your family. And I think that's easy for entrepreneurs to lose sight of, but it is different, right? So on one hand, it's a lot harder being the actual owner boss, but it does bring you a lot of that other flexibility that I just never would have had otherwise in my career.
Which is also like valuable flexibility
yeah,
at this phase of life.
Yeah.
So, all right, let me get into it, which is to also say, like, Tara's been able to tag along through watching the law firm grow, and then has started playing a very active role in the conference, SM Bash.
Yep.
And by the way, I'm shouting it out, is an author. I buy your stuff, so don't try to hide. The point is, like, you have been a serial adventurer in business, which I think as people are out there like wondering, should I do this? Is this for me? I think if you find yourself like curious about business things, pursuing things like writing or building and doing an event, that to me is always a sign that maybe that self-starting, that willingness to stay up late and knock stuff out, like, you gotta have that when you go buy a business, because you're going to get punched in the freaking face. And then it will require you to live that life. So I know you're going to be relatively politically correct on here, but I just want people to know you guys came into it. Like, you always gave me the impression that you're down for this adventure.
Oh yeah. That's kind of a side story. We had a piano tuner at our house once and I was telling him about all my different pursuits and I said it not with shame, but a little bit of like, it's kind of weird, right? But he was like, no, like that means he said that exact word, that you are curious and you're an adventurer. And I think those two things show that you have a willingness to learn and a willingness to work until the problem is figured out. And those qualities can be showcased in many different ways, but as long as you have those qualities, then you'll be able to own and operate a business.
Well, it's all it you know, I do think there's some benefit to buying and operating a business that you can identify with, that you maybe enjoy the work product and things like that. But it does underscore the fact that what the business does probably matters a lot less than people think if they otherwise have the attributes of entrepreneurship. And we talk about that a lot in ETA, and you see that a lot of, folks transitioning mid-career that like never in a million years would you have ever thought was going to consider buying a plumbing company. Well, that's because it doesn't really matter that it's a plumbing company. What matters is the drive for independence, the desire, the curiosity, the desire and drive to build and be successful. Plumbing just happens to be the platform, of the moment that made the most sense at the time. So I do think there's a healthy dose as people jump on a search journey of not like, oh, I've always dreamed of owning a car wraps business, but looking at all those other attributes and being really honest with yourself. Do I have that drive and what it takes to want to be successful? Because that matters a heck of a lot more than what is the actual thing, what is the actual widget that the company I'm buying produces.
So let's not bury the lead. What did you buy, and talk about like your search journey? Where are you located physically? Where is the business?
Yeah.
How did you find it? Get into it.
So for us, we were industry neutral, but we were not location neutral. And we knew that we wanted managers in place, which a lot of people who are going to buy a business, they're going to become the owner operator. We knew that in this stage of life, we weren't willing to give up that flexibility and freedom. So I think those were kind of the two of the most important things. Is we wanted it here in Dallas, which here we are, and we wanted a manager who was going to stay with the company and be there to help us grow. So yeah.
Which comes from a position of immense privilege, I understand, right? And that's only, and I only say this for people listening because I have a otherwise successful job with the law firm where I can support the family financially and things like that. So we've been in this ecosystem for 4 years, right? 3.5 years at the point we actually closed in January. Not everyone has that luxury, I get. And we talk a lot about that. I know you're famous for it, Sam, of like, of all the different parameters you can look at, the narrower you get, the harder your search is. And yeah, trying to find that unicorn of a good business, cash flowing business with managers in place that's SBA financeable, that's really hard to find. And yeah, that's why we didn't buy something in 2023. It took us till 2026 because it is hard to find. And so it bears noting that that's important.
So like, you didn't necessarily get to pick size or the industry. You had to, in some sense, like filter for the other two things and then get a little lucky.
Yes.
Well, yeah. And to an extent we were agnostic in the sense that we were kind of open to anything interesting. But again, coming from a place of privilege, like we didn't have to buy a business. This is something we wanted to do for the next phase of my wife's career to build, family wealth for our family. So we weren't just going to buy the first thing that looked good on paper because we knew we wanted something that would be interesting to the family, that would be fun to run, that would get our kids excited. So, we probably wouldn't have bought a plumbing company, for example, which may make a lot of sense for a lot of searchers out there, but that's just that it didn't have those other attributes from a place where we didn't have to be doing this. This wasn't an income and career replacement. So we did really want something that we were going to enjoy going to, talking about, spending weekends with. And so, cars is that, I mean, it's in our family's blood, so it's not a chore to me to be at a car show on Saturday morning, talking about our brand when I've otherwise had a really busy week at work. And that was really important to us.
Yeah. And I
Ooh, I think that might go unsaid too often. The requirements of being the owner don't bother you because you're kind of interested in the industry you're in.
Yeah. And I think we forgot that detail. We bought a car wrapping company.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Called what? Located where?
It is called Supreme Wraps Dallas. And we chose to buy into a franchise. It is a brand new franchise, which means we actually are becoming very close with the franchisor, and we are helping. We're allowed to help steer the direction in which the franchise will grow. We have a voice, which I will say I really like, and it's really great. So, many people have been telling their stories of the seller. Our seller is very hands-on. He cares very much about our success because we're one of 3 franchise locations. And he relies heavily or not on our advice if we have feedback or things that we see need to be changed. And so it's really nice that we're growing with the company and that we have a say.
And who are your customers? Other businesses or consumers or both?
Both. Primarily in the back or in the past, our main bread and butter has been consumers. So we do a lot of Teslas. We do a lot of window tinting. And then I've got 2 McLarens in my shop right now. And I think there was a Rolls Royce that already rolled through this week. So typically, I know, it's a great one, right? Typically, we have 3 super luxury cars. And then we typically have 2, regular people cars, so BMWs and Lexus and Teslas. And then the tint jobs could be anyone. But we are building our commercial side and learning a lot and some growing pains with that commercial side. I would say we have 1 to 2 commercial jobs per week as well. So, but
Cool.
that was where we were thinking our growth ad would be.
So how do you guys divide responsibility? And can you give some stories around like punches you took, lessons you learned in the search, like pre-closing phase that you're an expert in this world and you still got punched in the nose?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I don't take any responsibility, so that's easy. I'll No, I know. I'm just messing. Yeah, I mean, Tara is the primary operator. She's in there every day. Our partner Eric asked me recently of how much of my time is distracted by Supreme Wraps, and I candidly told him almost none. Right, I can't afford to. Right, and my clients deserve that, which is a bummer because I do love the business and I would love to be more involved. But it's just the nature of how it is. So 98% falls on Tara's shoulders. That said, in terms of pre-closing, the reality is in terms of the division, the acquisition really is, I mean, it's what I do for a living, right? So that was 95% me, right? Up to the closing day. And yeah, I see a ton of these deals, but it doesn't really matter when it's not your deal. And that's just to take a step back from like operator business owner role, like let that be a lesson to everyone listening. As good as your advisors are, they do not have the same thing on the line as you do as the buyer, searcher, operator. Their advice is, I can't think of the right word, not compromised by that, but you need to understand that when you're getting advice, when you're getting feedback from all of these other people that are not stakeholders in your business, you need to take it with a grain of salt because they don't understand they don't understand your family finances. They don't understand your personalities. They don't understand a lot of things. And I think that came out in our process, right? I do risk for a living as a lawyer, but I'm also an entrepreneur, so I'm willing to take a healthy amount of risk. And I joke that I was like a really bad lawyer to myself on this deal, right? But that's just because it's me. I know where we could take that risk. But if I were an arm's length client, I probably would have advised things differently. We definitely, I mean, just to be like super candid, we definitely did what I preach to every searcher not to do, and that is undercapitalize at closing, right? We're 4 months in and sweating cash, right? Like sweating our cash flow, right? It's stressful because it's uncomfortably lower than where we should or would like to be. And yeah, I'm definitely in the seat of wishing that we had put more cash on the balance sheet. So I guess all that's to say, like, I've done, our firm's done almost 400 deals. I personally have done 100 plus of those deals. I see these all the time. I give the advice to the clients. Like, we're still in that J curve. We're still taking those kicks. We're still learning the hard lessons, and it's going to come. It doesn't matter how good of an operator you are or how clean of a deal process you run. This is just part of being an entrepreneur. And it is impossible to understand how to run your business in a 90-day diligence period. Literally impossible. So you're going to make mistakes and you're going to get kicked in the teeth. You can't learn around that in a 90-day acquisition process.
That was amazing. I think people should listen to that like 3 times. Yeah. First follow up for you though, Kevin. Then I want to get into Tara.
Yeah.
So you literally see clients do this hundreds of times. What surprise punches did you take pre-close?
Pre-close, the government, things completely out of our control. Government shutdown, right? The longest government shutdown in history was not something we saw coming, and certainly disrupted our deal process. I think I've said this on a recent episode. I say it to clients all the time. It does not matter how good of a organization you select on your deal team. What matters are the people. And I won't name names, but like, we worked with a bank that I thought this was going to be a layup process, but the people working our deal in terms of the closing team was an unmitigated nightmare. Our deal was probably the hardest deal that I've ever had to close banking wise, right? From the lender. And it was my own freaking deal, right? That was, we closed a month later than we should have, candidly. We had things ready to go before Christmas.
Most buyers don't realize that the SBA, you call it BDO, but that business development officer, that relationship person, quickly hands off the deal to like a processor or a closer.
They have
or somebody
nothing to
that's
do
more
with your closing process. Yeah. So we had things completely ready from our perspective. December 17th, I think. We closed January 12th, which is terrible because this is a seasonal business. So we literally closed in the rock bottom of the season. So you talk about cash and right? Like, that's part of it. If this deal had closed in October, like it had always intended to, we probably would have been in a much better cash position, even on the exact model that we closed on. And that's hard to predict. You can't predict your timing. So that was definitely a way we got kicked in the teeth that we should have planned for better as things were getting delayed. What else came up? Ooh.
Well, while you think about it, let's go to Tara then.
Yeah.
What about so Kevin handled most of the transaction.
Correct.
But then you stepped in and took over the keys, pun intended. So what was the difference between the business you thought you were buying and the business you actually bought? Open-ended question. Surprises, whatever you want.
I mean, I'll take it first. We hoped we were buying a business that was run by a general manager, that we'd have a little financial oversight and sit in the office to make sure things don't go off the rails.
So you thought it was going to be a little hands-off.
A little more hands-off. We were under no false impression that we were buying a passive company, to be clear.
Yeah.
And if any of you listening think that about the business you're buying, I'm going to ridicule you. We did think the management layer was and would have been more locked in than it is, for sure.
Correct. That is a big one that I thought that I would.
So what was the implication? The managers then didn't run the business standalone. You, Tara, had to play a bigger role than you thought.
Correct. And I think, well, we'll just be real, right? Because I wasn't super involved in buying the business and looking at those financials, and I was just like, oh, Kevin will do it, and I'll just take over and manage the people. So easy. And that's a little tongue in cheek. But I didn't understand every single facet of the company. I didn't understand the death by 1,000 cuts, and I didn't understand oh, the manager is only 30. And while I was a very different person at 30, today and age, I think the 30-year-olds are a little different, right? What you can take whatever you want from that. But
Totally.
but I think that yes, there is more. I think while my manager is amazing and a very honest and hardworking person, they do not understand business practices to the extent that I thought they would. They do not look at I thought that before they had been looking at the numbers. I thought they had understood the revenue and the profit margins. They were never part of that. They were never part of the numbers. They were only there to run the team and to bring in top line revenue. That's all they understand. And because we're wanting to grow and because I didn't look at the numbers beforehand, that is the reason for our curve is because I was making assumptions about the manager that were not accurate. And then so I took a more hands-off approach the first 3 months. And now I'm like, oh, he actually needs me to be doing these nitty-gritty analysis and to be saying, no, we can't afford that. Sure. Like, right. Everyone needed raises. Very typical of a purchase. Right. And so I'm like, well, of course, like, but I wasn't doing the analysis of, is that okay for that raise? Right. And I was thinking that he knew, right? I thought he understood that profit margin, but he did not and does not.
Well, let me first say something real quick. Kev, I don't know if you see this because you probably don't get into it as much, but because quality of earnings reviews, like accounting and finance diligence, is now a thing that a lot of small business buyers do, the feeling you have of like having deferred the analysis on the financials until close, I worry is far too common because searchers can just say to themselves, I checked that box. Yep. The financials are good.
Yep.
And like anybody out here, like if you read Costa Dio's newsletter, you know, like he is an insane financial analyst. So I'm not saying you have to be that. But I think, Kevin, what you were alluding to earlier is like you have to own every one of the diligence work streams. You have to own it. You don't have to understand every single nuance. But if you think you can just kind of defer it to the lawyer, defer it to the quality of earnings provider, you can't, because then you step in on day one and you don't understand. For example, like, okay, how do you sell? Do you sell by the foot, by the inch? Like,
Yeah.
at what gross margins do you sell to? Do your salespeople, did they go to your seller and get like sign off on quotes? Or did they independently do it? All those little things can kill you in the early days.
Well, and to take that a step further, we're a great example of how not that can go wrong, not only with your service providers, but as partners, right? If you're doing a partnered search, whether or not it's your spouse, right? It could be a separate partner, someone you met in business school or whatever. Presumably, as partners, you bring different strengths to the business, right? And so if you're the financial guy and your business partner is the operations guy, and so you as the financial guy spend 95% of your time in the deal understanding the quality of earnings, unpacking the P&L, and understanding the financials backwards and forwards. And then on day one, your operations guy steps in to take over operations and has none of that context. You're toast, right? And that's kind of what we experienced and didn't fully appreciate. Not only, even with the fact that like Tara's never been in the business world. So not only is financial not her general area of expertise, you've never really, outside of accounting 101 at BYU, right? Like never analyzed a P&L, right? And so on day one of closing, I'm now almost entirely out of the business, right? I understand the quality of earnings. I understand the P&L, but I'm focused on my clients, right? This was just one of many deals I closed and I'm running my law practice. She's now in the operator seat without any of that context of the P&L and the impact of things. And I'm certainly not watching it because I'm not the primary operator. I think that's a really important cautionary tale for partnered searches, because it's really easy to silo yourselves into your areas of expertise and get underwater pretty rapidly when you aren't on the same page about like what's happening and what you're paying attention to.
So Tara, is your job to stay in touch with the seller and like manage these learnings with the seller, and then really just try to sort of push through the lack of understandings that you had to today and probably for the next year?
Yeah. So, so our seller's name is Steve. So Steve was with me at the shop a few hours a day, every day for the first month, probably. And because we're franchisees, he is working through what he wants his SOPs to be for training new franchisees. So he was
To be clear, you didn't say one thing. Your seller is also the franchisor.
Correct.
Yeah,
yes.
That's an important nuance. And before we run out of time, it's worth circling back on, because we did buy into an early stage franchise. And I do think there's some caution there we should talk through. So let's circle back to that. But yes, our seller opened 4 locations and then decided to turn the brand into a franchise. So he sold off 3 of them to individual buyers like us to become his first franchisees. He's got 2 more locations coming online next month. So it's starting to grow. But yeah, that important context.
Yeah, that's why earlier I said he's highly invested in our success, because if we don't do well, then he's not going to sell more franchises and it's going to look bad. But anyway, so he was in the shop every day for a few hours and had this standard operating procedure for training franchisees he was working through. But it was good as a 101, but it did not help me truly understand what it was going to take on a day-to-day to understand my margins, right? Which is where in a business like this, you're going to make it or break it.
Your responsibility, because you got into this seat not knowing a ton.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, you always find that it is not as advertised. Well, it doesn't have to be malice or otherwise.
Correct.
It can just be it's not like a sim can accurately portray what the seller does. So is it your job to take over what the seller's roles and responsibilities were? Is it your job to manage the business day to day now?
Yes, it will be my job. Like I said, I was giving more confidence into my manager than I think he's ready for. He is only 30, and like I said, I thought he had seen and been part of the financials, and he had not. And so now here we are, month 4, just finished up, and I now know that it is going to be a learning curve for me to train him, because I do want him to grow with the business and continue to be our manager, but also to train me to not trust without verifying, right? I need to understand every single number and be part of all the decisions until I am 100% proficient, so that I can run the team better and that we can grow.
And that's something I don't think like anybody listening, like that's the part, no matter how good of a management layer you can inject, that I think you can ever get away from, right? The moral hazard is just too great with a non-owner, right? It's the motivation is too high for your sales guy to push through a low margin or negative margin job to make a sales quota, for example, right? It's too easy for a general manager to, swipe the credit card for something that maybe isn't as necessary as they thought, when it's not coming out of their bottom line, right? It's not hitting their paycheck. And so that it's important to hear. I mean, until you're very professionalized in a much larger company than what we're talking about in self-funded search, that layer of management, I don't think an owner operator will ever or should ever get away from.
I agree. And I should stress, you had enough foresight to go out there thinking we want to be able to be hands off or less hands on. And I don't know if that ever exists in small business land.
Yeah, I agree. It does not, because like he just said, and I'm going to emphasize, they don't care as much, right? It as much as my manager cares and is enthusiastic and loves what he does, he has no skin in the game. And if push came to shove, he would go find another job.
I agree. Okay, so we don't have a ton of time left, but I want to make sure we get into some other stuff, which is probably just as interesting. Whose job is it to think about growth ideas in your business partnership? And what are those growth ideas, if you're comfortable sharing?
Like I said, I don't think about this business at all, Sam.
There are times we have conversations, and I'm just kind of the reality check person, right? So we will both discuss growth ideas. And when we bought the company, we got ownership or first rights to the second location here in Dallas, which is going to be in Fort Worth. So we bought the company with growth in mind and with we get the first he's not going to offer Fort Worth to anyone else unless we say we don't want it. And right now we are still searching. And so in our heads, for us, growth is a second location. And also the other area of growth, which we both knew that we were bringing, was our commercial. But we have a lot to learn in commercial before we're going to pursue that as a main product of growth. But because of Kevin's network, we knew that was going to be a big part of our growth. But because I understand that every day I'll sort of have reality checks with some of his growth ideas.
Do you mind, can I poke there? So commercial means you would wrap small business owners' trucks, like a home service company, a commercial service company.
Yep.
They'd come to you and you'd wrap all their trucks.
Yep.
So I totally get why that seems like a great growth channel. So what's the reality? Is it more competitive? They expect a lower price point?
Yeah, it's margin.
Yeah.
And perhaps rightly so, because it can become a volume game, right? So the problem is that it's very rarely the volume game that it's promised to be, right? If you are a commercial landscape company with 45 trucks and you're rebranding, you are probably not paying for 45 wraps in the next 60 days because you can't afford it, right? That's a massive hit to your P&L. So you're going to do 3 trucks a month for the next 2 years, right? That sounds great because it's steady income, but they're lower margin jobs, right? And so you have to balance that with, if we can wrap an F-150 and make, $600 per job. I'm totally making up numbers, by the way, and make $600 on that commercial F-150, or I can go get a McLaren and charge $12,000 and make, $7,000 margin. It's a no-brainer what the right margin is, right? Then it becomes a volume game analysis. Well, I can get 45 trucks from this business over the next 24 months. I'm going to get one McLaren out of that guy over the next 5 years, potentially, depending on who it is, right? We have some cool clients that I won't name names that are wealthy, and we do
every couple of years
or sooner, which is cool. But yeah, that's the blessing and curse of commercial. And so successful commercial shops have the efficiencies down to a science to be able to churn the jobs through quickly. And part of the problem is the ethos of Supreme Wraps from the day it was founded was premium luxury wrap. And that's the quality that we put out. You cannot put out that quality on an F-150 landscape truck at the volume you need to put it out with the lower margin, right? And so there's some difference in team culture too, of if we're getting a PPF job from a customer off the street that just bought a Raptor and it's his, the final expensive truck he's ever going to buy, and he's going to pay us $11,000. That's going to be the most gorgeously wrapped Raptor coming out of the Supreme Wrap shop that Dallas has seen, right? We pride ourselves on that quality. We cannot do that on a $4,000 commercial F-150 for a landscape company. And so there's 2 cultures you have to build in a small team of take your time and do car show quality on this one, but at 10 a.m., I need you to hop over here and do speed, right? And good enough is good enough to get out the door. And that's just hard.
For the record, nothing that leaves my shop is good enough. It is all beautiful. My guys take a lot of pride in their work.
That's also a challenge because you as the owner need to put out the mentality of never being good enough
Correct.
for quality, you also have to make dollars.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, and that's part of the J curve we're going through right now, because that is true, and because the commercial jobs are lower margin, it's killing us, right? Not killing us, right? But we're taking a financial hit from it, and so there's a balance of either updating and getting, job costing better, which is going to increase prices, or increased efficiency. And so there's a balance there. And Supreme Wraps has historically not been a commercial shop. Like I said, its focus is on premium luxury wrap, which is why we do the best wraps in Dallas. I don't think that's sales puffery. I think that's generally true, and what we're known for. That's very difficult to translate to commercial, because the commercial guys are just like us, focused on their P&L, and they want, they want low cost.
Yep.
What's interesting is this is not all that dissimilar than CoStub's business, which was started as a residential home services, high quality ethos business, and the challenge of bringing in a commercial division.
Yeah.
It's an obvious growth area, and yet in all respects, the margin profile, the mentality and culture built around that division is hard to build. And I think a lot of people in ETA may want to start by asking themselves, because a lot of people need the geography as their North Star. They want to buy in Texas or Dallas or DFW area. So they don't necessarily get to pick their industry. But I think the B2B versus B2C framing is a good one, because cultures tend to be very different, whether they're B2B or B2C, and it's hard to do both. So quickly, because I know we're probably running out of time, do you have the ability on the Fort Worth? Because I was just in Texas, so I understand how far away those places are. Could you make Fort Worth the commercial division and physically separate the ethoses?
It's funny you mentioned that.
Ethi?
That is the plan. Yes.
Yeah, so
okay.
if you know DFW, the territory is basically split at the airport, and our location's in the Colony. It's Supreme Wraps Dallas, but it covers the whole Dallas side. We're actually in the Colony. So the area that we're looking at near a town called South Lake, it probably won't be in South Lake because it's a terrible place to do business. But the areas that we're looking at and targeting are specifically because it's like, we'll probably open the shop in a hotbed of commercial kind of warehousing, home services. It'll likely be a larger shop with a larger garage, so we can get, bigger trucks and trailers and stuff in there. And the
you
plan
don't need
would
retail drive-by, so you don't need premium real estate.
Exactly.
Correct.
You're better off being convenient to the commercial vehicle flow.
Yep.
You can have an easier time employing, maybe. That's cool. So I kind of want to do this in a
not
year
to let
again.
too many secrets out here on the podcast, but yeah.
That was an awesome conversation, Tara. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. You're welcome.
That was neat.
Yeah, you're welcome,
Kev,
Sam.
any last word before we call it a day?
I have no last words other than absolutely shameless free airtime here. If you are in the DFW area, Supreme Wraps with a hyphen, look us up. Come by the shop. Tara's always there, and legitimately our team lives, eats, and breathes cars. And like, people are always weird. Like, I don't know if I can come look. Like, if you've got kids that are into cars, come by and check out what's in the shop, talk shop.
We're just not going to let them touch anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, please do keep us in mind, whether you're on the commercial side or you just bought your dream car. We'd love to talk to you about it and how to protect it. But other than that, that's my last word, Sam.
Awesome. Well, that was a great episode of Main Street Deals from the inside of a deal.